What up, and greetings. Welcome to another Hearthstone card review. I'm back, ladies and gentlemen, with episode 7 of my card review from Whispers of the Old Gods. We have 7 cards that we'll be taking a look at today. That means that 42 cards have been revealed so far, which means that there's, of course, about 100 cards to still come out, so despair not, because your worst nightmares and your best dreams might still come true. First card on today's list is a spell for priests. This is second priest card after Herald Volash that has been announced. It's called Shadow Word Horror. It's a lot of exploding murlocs for 4 mana. It destroys all minions with 2 or less attack. Another spell that affects both sides of the board equally, which is somewhat typical for priest. You already have Circle of Healing, you have got Confuse, you've got Excavated Evil and Light Bomb. Now, Light Bomb is the only spell that Priest is going to be losing going into the standard format, and I think this will hurt him a lot, because it's one of the spells that destroyed some decks like Handlock. It just obliterated Handlock. If they overextended, you just destroyed majority of their big dudes at one swing, and then you had a chance to play something else. Light Bomb is an amazing card in those situations where you couldn't keep up with using your Shadow Word Depths and entombing the guys, and your Holy Novas, Excavated Evils, and Circles just don't reach some high health minions, but if they have the same amount of attack and health, you still destroy them in one big hit with the Lightwell, which is really amazing. The second benefit of Light Bomb in a Priest is that Priest usually has high health and low attack minions, meaning that after you hit with the Lightwell, you still can keep some of your stuff. You can keep your Northshire Clerics, and your Museum Curators, and your Dragon Whelps, and your Wyrmnest Agents, whereas this destroys all of that. It destroys Deathlord. Okay, Deathlord is going to be out of standard, but usually aggro will play 3/2s rather than 2 frees. I feel the only deck that I can see playing a lot of 2 attack minions is, apart from Zoo, probably Aggro Shaman. So the ideal scenario, I guess, for this card is destroying like a Leper Gnome, Flame Juggler, and 2 Feral Spirits on turn 4 and saving your face. But apart from that, I don't see the point of this card. I'd rather play 2 Holy Novas rather than one of this card. Shadow Madness, that is a more versatile and stronger card in my opinion, doesn't even see play. So unless something ridiculously changes, I don't really see point in this card being released. Second card on today's list is a dragon for 6 mana. We get a 2/8. It's called Scaled Nightmare, and at the start of your turn, it doubles this minion's attack. The effect somewhat similar to Gazrilla's, except for it doesn't have to get damaged, but it happens nevertheless every single turn. In the 6 mana slot, we have 2 neutral dragons at the moment. It's the Draconid Crusher and Volcanic Drake. While I think this is better than both of these, it's very hard to say if this will get played because it's very slow. And even if the meta slows down a bit, it has to take 2 turns until it starts becoming scary. And yeah, while Priest is the most common seen dragon deck out there, and it can combo this with something like an Inner Fire to hit for 16 the turn after, it also has a lot of turn 6 plays already. You know, it probably wants to Cabal Shadow Priest also Vanas on turn 6. Or even Entomb is more likely than having the option to play this guy on turn 6. And talking about Cabal Shadow Priest, let me change your mind. So while there's a lot of potential upside to this card, I see a lot more potential downside because it takes at least 2 turns for it to be worth. If something hits it like a Yeti for 4, it still lives and this becomes a 4/4, meaning that the next turn the Yeti just kills it. You know, a 4/5 totally punishes this out of the world, and you're giving the opponent the option to deal with this, most likely because it's a 2/8. It doesn't really kill anything the first turn when it's played, and unless it survives with 8 health until the next turn, it will most possibly not be worth the mana that you have spent on it. And yes, I know that if you keep this behind a taunt wall and let it grow, as a priest you have access to many powerful taunts, it will win you the game, but there's many cards that if they are kept behind a taunt wall will win you the game, like a Manatee Totem, and that's a 0/3, so yeah. We'll see. Maybe one-off in some dragon decks is definitely cool that they didn't forget about dragon and the mech tribes, and they're still printing out more cards for those players that enjoy those decks. Scaled Nightmare, let me change your mind. Next card on today's list is the newly released Paladin card. So along Ragnaros the Light Lord, we have Steward of Darkshire. It's a free mana, free, so not amazing stats, but quite an amazing effect. Whenever you summon a 1 health minion, give a Divine Shield. Magma Rager is finally good, yes! No, seriously, this card is gonna be quite amazing, I think, in Shokadin or Aggro Paladin, Ebola, whatever you want to call it, the decks. And I can see these getting played quite a lot because they have been relatively successful in the past. Paladins don't really have 1 health minions, as in their class, except for something like a Noble Sacrifice that this actually triggers from. But there's many 1 health aggro minions that this will synergize very well with. So let's go over them. There's Abusive Sergeant, there's Leper Gnome, there's South Sea Deckhand, Worgen Infiltrator. This is going to be actually quite amazing with Young Priestess, because it gives it Divine Shield and then Young Priestess buffs something else, meaning that it won't die to a ping because it needs another ping to kill it. Bluegill Warrior, which would become an Argent Horse Rider if this is on board, meaning that you pay 1 less mana for the same effect. And with Wolf Rider, it can actually be pretty insane because free one with Divine Shield and Charge that can trade into something and requires another action to be killed is very, very good. With Justicar, which doubles your hero power, it is essentially like if you're summoning 2 Argent Squires per turn for the same amount of mana without spending any cards on them. And maybe, just maybe, if BGH gets nerfed and Silence gets nerfed, this could work to make a massive Blood Knight. I didn't say that! Yeah, maybe it could actually work with the Blood Knight. Crazy thought right there. The biggest issue with this card that I see is that it's only free health, so it dies literally to anything on turn 3. It is a must-kill card for the opponent because if he sees this card, he can probably assume that you are playing a deck that is tailored for this card to be really amazing in it. In an Inspire type of deck, is this better than Silverhand Regent? Sometimes, perhaps. I think that as opposed to Silverhand Regent that will only summon a 1/1 Squire every turn, this can spiral out of control by buffing multiple minions with Divine Shield on the same turn. But then that doesn't really fit the aggro archetype that I can see this in because it's more like a Hobgoblin type of deck where you keep all the minions on hand for majority of the game before you pop them down. And Enhancer Mechano only really works in aggro because it buffs whatever you already have on board, whereas this buffs the minions that come after it's being played. Again, hard to imagine this card fitting in any existing deck right now, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have the chance to fit in decks in the future when Whispers of the Old Gods are released and the standard rolls out. This can definitely find a place in a Paladin deck. We have to wait and see and get surprised by Steward of Darkshire. Next one from the cards that have been revealed is Skeram Cultist. Is a neutral minion for 6 mana, 7/6. With exactly the same effect as Beckoner of Evil and Cthulhu's Chosen do. So Battlecry gives your Cthulhu +2/+2 wherever it is. We have a small guy for 2 mana, which is the Beckoner. We have a medium guy, which is Cthulhu's Chosen, and now we got the big guy in a Skeram Cultist. And depending on how Cthulhu's decks are gonna play out, I can see it really going 2 ways. Either you're gonna only include minions that buff Cthulhu that are not completely terrible, and this is not completely terrible, so this might be included, and then you try to build your Cthulhu to be as big as possible in order to just 30 Arcane Missiles the opponent's face and wipe the entire board, and then you just have to do perhaps a little bit of damage to just finish the opponent off. Or the decks are gonna only aim to buff Cthulhu to, let's say, 10. So cards like Klaxi, Amber Weaver, and the Angel Shieldbearer will, have their Battlecry effects fulfill. And then the rest of the cards, you will just play utility and good quality cards, because if this is better than Sylvanas, that's very debatable, and 6 slots is generally very competitive. It's probably not better than Cairn, because a lot of minions that are going out that were better than Cairn are not going to be included in the standard. We're taking a look at this card, seeing that it's a 7/6 instead of a 6/7. That's naturally worse for us, because we're thinking about BGH. And even if BGH doesn't get nerfed, it eats up a BGH before your Cthulhu comes out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And while I think this is not as good as Beckoner or Cthulhu's Chosen, it can be playable, and if the decks are going to be aiming to make Cthulhu as massive as possible and have Cthulhu as a anything sort of finishing combo that just pew 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 pews for half an hour into the opponent and finishes off the game. If that's the case, then this guy will definitely be included in those type of decks, and I just think that cards like Twilight Elder are better because they buff Cthulhu continuously if they survive, whereas this is one of a time effect. At the same time, you're not really spending anything on this Battlecry, because if it was a vanilla 7-6, even with BGA still around, that's not that bad. I mean, look at Skeleton Knight, and the Beast, and Corehound, and a lot of other minions that are just a lot worse than this. So, it's decent. It's not bad. It's decent. It's not bad. It's decent. Next one on our list is the new spell for mages. It's called Cabalist Tome. It's a 5-mana spell that adds 3 random mage spells to your hand. Another one of those cards that have been given to streamers to reveal. This one was given to Reynard, and I can pretty much guess that he said that it was trash. I haven't watched his review, but he says that about a lot of cards. And while I do agree that this is not an amazing card, Casino Mage will probably be happy about this card, as it's another random card. And we might see a Grinder Mage coming into play with cards that are trying to draw from outside the deck rather than from the deck, and therefore outlast the opponent and win through the fatigue game. And while this will allow for some amazing plays, and I'm sure that this card will have a decent spot in the Trolldom videos as well, drawing from outside the game and at random is usually less reliable than drawing from your deck, and this card is pricey, but when you take a look at Sprint or Lay on Hands that draw more than 2 cards from your deck, they're even pricier than this, but they draw from the deck, meaning that they will draw into your combos and cards that they've put there for a reason in order to win the game and because they synergize well with each other. And yeah, while you can argue with the fact that Mage utilizes spells very, very well, and you can use it to make your mana worm grow, and you can discount it with Sorcerer's Apprentice, and you can pew pew with your Flame Waker, and you can copy fireballs into your hands with Archmage. But as a Tempo Mage, you already have access to a lot of cheaper, more effective, and spells that in general do more with the board, and that's just what you want. So more of a fun card, really, in my opinion. Mage doesn't really need anything else than it has in the classic set anyway, because most of his spells are overpowered bullshit. So it's fine. And before the last card on our list, that is of course the newly released god Yashraj. We have a card that will synergize with the existing gods, assuming that Yogg-Saron is also 10 mana. What it does, at the start of your turn, you put a 10-cost minion from your deck into your hand. A card that was very much anticipated to come out, because what good are the old gods if you keep the entire game buffing them up and you expect them to come out and be your win condition and they just stay at the bottom of your deck as the last card and you just never get to play them. This card can prevent that by fetching the old god and putting it inside your hand, which if it's the only 10 cost mana minion, it will always be the case. The downsides is that it's quite understated, and it's also at the start of your turn instead of at the end of your turn, meaning that it might not live until the start of your next turn, and it's pretty much a must-kill card for the opponent like Emperor or Ysera is, meaning that if he has the resources, he will choose to kill it every single time without fail, because he knows that if he doesn't, then it will just lose him the game. So for it to be reliable, you should really play 2 of these instead of 1, because one of them might just be eating a fireball or something, and you might not also be playing this on turn 6 because the stats are not great, and you might just be keeping the tempo plays until turn 9 when you play this, and then on turn 10 you just drop the old god. And if that doesn't work out, then on turn 10, probably you drop the second one, hoping that that one will live on. And if that fails, I guess you'll just have to wait until you draw into it. This card could be great with stealth cards like Conceal or even the Toxins or Spare Parts. Unfortunately, Ancestral Call is going out with the departure of GVG from Standard. So when you draw into the old god, you cannot drop it freely for 4 mana, which would have been a lot of fun. I guess that we're gonna have to be looking at other ways how to discount our gods and how to get them into our hand in order to play them. This might not be the only card that fetches a 10-cost minion from your deck and puts it into your hand. There might be minions that come out that are fetching a god in specific. We have to wait and see for that. This might be an auto-include in old god decks. I really like the fact that there are cards that work with multiple gods decks, not just with one of them. If we don't have other cards like this might be an auto-include or even a 2-of in all the gods-centered decks. And if you don't play this on turn 6, you might play this on turn 8 or 9 when it has a larger chance to survive. Sends gods in my hand. If the gods doesn't show, then you owe me, owe me, owe. Last card on today's list is the third old god that has been released. He's called the Yashraj, Rage Unbound, and it's a 10 mana, 10/10. At the end of your turn, put a minion from your deck into the battlefield. After Cthulhu, then Enzov, and now Yashraj have been revealed, we're now only waiting for Yogg-Saron, and I'm very hopeful for that card because Enzov and Yashraj seem kind of underwhelming for my liking. Yogg-Saron also has a lot of nostalgia connected to it for myself, and I guess a lot of people out there because I used to attempt him in Ulduar like all the time. And his madness-inducing ability, which made you in the raid to stand with your back towards him or with your side towards him in order not to get mental and not to start attacking the other people in your raid, has been one of the most amazing and unusual abilities that I've ever encountered in a World of Warcraft boss. And I hope that they will try to put it in Hearthstone or somehow try to implement the mechanic in-game, and maybe his followers will be inducing madness to your opponent. That would be so cool. Please, Blizzard, please, if you haven't done it, remake the card. And people take a look at this card and they say another target for BGH, and that's true. Unlike Enzov, that is only 6 attack, this will die right now to a BGH, but we all hope that BGH will get altered or taken out of the game in one way or another. So I see a bigger problem with this card, that it actually doesn't do enough on the turn when it's played. Yes, it summons a minion, and the minion can be a big taunt wall. But compared to something like an Enzov that summons, you know, something like 4 to 6 Death Rattle minions pretty much at that point in the game, or Cthulhu that splashes the enemy board with pings from 10 to 20 damage, most likely, this just doesn't do enough. People compare it to Varian Rin, and that one draws you free cards and sticks some minions on board if these free cards are minions, and this only summons 1 minion. And yeah, Varian isn't guaranteed to put any minions on board because all of these cards might be spells, and this will always put a minion on board, and it's also +3/+3 on stats. But the 10 mana, who really cares about stats on a minion anyway? Maybe in a druid deck that can ramp itself up through Wild Groves and then innovate it before turn 10 and have only a couple of little dudes that at that point would have died and be drawn, and then just summon a big guy every single turn. Or maybe even work with Astral Communion. But I don't think that's necessarily very reliable for ladder purposes. And from the free gods, I think Cthulhu is actually the strongest one. Which is funny because Blizzard is giving it to us for free. So nice move, Blizzard. I don't have big hopes for Yashraj, but again, there might be crazy combinations that I cannot see and we cannot see at this point with the cards that will still come out in the future. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you haven't yet. I'll be reviewing more cards very, very soon. Until then, be good and bye. Take care.